Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Asevana chabala nam pandichanam chasevana etam mangalam uttamam. So from the Mangala Sutta, to associate with wise people instead of associating with fools. To not associate, in Australia, not hang out with idiots. To hang out with cool people. The coolest people, of course, being the ones who have cooled towards Nibbana. And I have to say it's very nice to be here in the very friendly atmosphere of Santi, with a very old friend, someone who I've known for 21 years, some newer friends, some dear friends, an old spiritual friend, Bhante Sujato, coming along, hanging out, a new spiritual friend, Bonhon Sunim, coming along yesterday. So the atmosphere here has been very friendly, and I'm very appreciative of that. So probably you can tell this is a little talk on friendship and its place in the spiritual path. So we understand the many benefits, social and psychological, of friendship, that we feel connected, that we belong, we feel supported, cared for. But when the Buddha talked about friendship, he also talked about the spiritual dimension to friendship. And for him there was an ethical dimension also to friendship. So he points out there's two kinds of friendship, two sorts of friends: good friends, wholesome friends, and unwholesome friends, bad friends, good company, bad company. And in the Anguttara ones, he talks about there being not a single thing more conducive to declining wholesome states and increasing unwholesome states as bad company. But there's nothing, not a single thing, that's more conducive to increasing wholesome states and decreasing unwholesome states as good company, good friendship. And he also says that friendship is an external factor. And I always like this idea, because usually when I think about external factors, I think about the climate, I think about food, the accommodation, and people will often say things to you like, when you go on retreat, oh, may you have wonderful internal and external conditions. But he regards friendship as an external condition. And so he says that good friendship is a wholesome external condition that will lead to great good and success. And bad friendship or bad company is an unwholesome external factor that will lead to harm. And so he has these ethical dimensions to friendship, and an understanding that we need to carefully choose our friends, choose our company. The reason for this, he says, is that we become like our company. So we become our friends. The image he used is that of a rotten fish wrapped in grass. So soon the grass will take on the stench of the rotting fish. But he says a wholesome friendship is like powdered incense wrapped in a leaf, and the leaf will take on that wonderful perfume, the fragrance of the incense. So he talks a lot about associating with the wise, these people being beneficial, the good perfume that will leave us perfumed and fragrant. But it's not enough just to associate with wise people. We also need to look at their good qualities, and not just hope to absorb them, but endeavour to emulate those qualities. And so this is the role that the Kalyanamitta plays in Buddhism. Kalyanamitta being the beautiful friend, the wise friend, the admirable friend, who we can follow, who is an inspiration and a guide to us, who shows us the correct way to behave, shows us the correct attributes to cultivate, and ultimately gives us right view, shows us the truth. And the Buddha says in the Gosa Sutta, in the Anguttara 2s, there is nothing more conducive to right view than the voice of another and wise attention, yoniso manasikara, and nothing more conducive to wrong view than the voice of another and wrong attention, ayoniso manasikara. So this voice of another is key for us as spiritual practitioners, needing to hear the Dhamma so that we can practice it, not having discovered it for ourselves like the Buddha did. He was the Magga Desika, the pathfinder, the self-awakened one. He was able to see this path, and he is a beautiful, admirable friend for all the qualities that we just chanted before about him, but also because he was capable of sharing that with us, sharing it with the people of the day, who also were able to achieve enlightenment. And so on and so on, it goes down, coming all the way down to us, giving us still a chance, hopefully today, maybe, possibly, to attain enlightenment in this lifetime. So when I think about the Buddha, I often think about an image in the suttas of a mountain. And there's a story, actually one of the people in the story is Jayasara, Prince Jayasara, and Avijayasevana, who were talking about the spiritual path. They're talking about renunciation and abandoning sensual pleasures. And the Buddha helped by providing an image of a mountain, and he said, imagine two friends going for a walk, and they come to a big mountain, and one of the friends stays below in the thick jungle, and the other friend climbs a path and goes all the way up to the top of the mountain. And in this story they can magically communicate with each other. I don't know how, perhaps they had a telephone. And so the person at the bottom says, "What can you see up there?" And the person at the top says, "I can see fields, cities, pleasure gardens, roads, all sorts of things from up here." And the person down below says, "That can't be true. All I can see down here is roots and tree trunks and leaves." And he doesn't believe the person at the top of the hill. And so the person at the top comes all the way down and takes this second person by the hand, and they walk up the hill. And then the second person says, yes, now I can see these pleasure parks, these roads, these cities. So before, this person didn't have right view. They couldn't see. So the Kalyanamitta role is to provide this right view, to help people see the truth. And this is what the Buddha does. And this is why when poor Ananda, who's always getting in trouble for saying the wrong things and thinking the wrong things and doing the wrong things, when he said to the Buddha, "Oh Buddha, the spiritual friendship is half of the spiritual life," and the Buddha said, "No, don't say that, Ananda, don't say that. It's the whole of the spiritual life." And he explained why. And he said, "It is because of dependence on me that beings who were born have abandoned, have been released from being born. beings who suffered sickness, old age and death have been released from sickness, old age and death. Beings who experienced sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair have been released. That is, they have been released from suffering, independence on the Buddha. And this is why, because of the power of another's word and right attention, because of the power of right view, the Buddha is regarding spiritual friendship as integral to the spiritual path, the whole of the spiritual path. And I often think how lost I would be if I had never heard the words of the Buddha, if I had never started down this path, and it was only really by chance, just hearing the word of another and paying attention, seeing something there. And how does this happen then? It's one thing to hear, another thing to pay attention. But when the Buddha talked about spiritual friendship, it was a process occurring, the leaf becoming more fragrant. And in the Sambodhi, the Sutta of Self-Awakening, he says that friendship is the first prerequisite to developing the Bodhipakkhidhammas, the wings of awakening. It's the first prerequisite. You need to have spiritual friends. Why? So that you can hear the Dhamma. And hearing the Dhamma means that you hear sobering, inspiring Dhamma that can possibly change your view, change your life. And by associating with people who are good, people who have good qualities like wisdom, faith in the doctrine, people who think about virtue, generosity. When we associate with these people, we also take on, like that perfumed leaf, take on those beautiful qualities of virtue, faith, and wisdom. And so when we associate with good people, we become good ourselves. And hearing the Dhamma, we have many chances to talk and have conducive conversation about things related to the Dhamma. So things like conversation on modesty, on contentment, on virtue, on generosity, on things like meditation and the nature of enlightenment. And this is something you see even here at Santi when Venerable gives her daily reflections. We have the chance to hear the Dhamma. We have good people around us and we have conversation on these things. And it lifts us. It makes us shine. It's like an ornament to our mind, hearing these things. Keeps on pushing us very gently towards right view. And we also, in company like this, in a good place like Santi, a friendly place, sitting here tonight, practicing meditation together, gives us a kind of strength, gives us a sense of unity, and helps us to develop our wholesome qualities and abandon our unwholesome qualities. So this is right effort. And at this stage of the sutta, the Buddha is talking specifically about meditation. So things like abandoning the 5 hindrances, but cultivating the bojjhangas, the stages of enlightenment. And we can also think about how we can abandon other bad qualities that we might have and try to make the effort to develop good qualities that we have in our behaviour and speech and mental states. And then also, when we hang out with good people, we have this opportunity to develop wisdom and insight based on all of these good things. Thinking about the Dharma, practicing meditation, gives us this opportunity to benefit with insight and wisdom. And this, of course, is what drives our understanding towards right view. So these are all very positive, beautiful, uplifting things that come from associating with good people. And sometimes when you think about the Sangha today, the monasteries we've stayed in, You might have some sort of lingering doubt as to whether it's still possible to have good friendship, good community that is conducive to developing right view. And you might think, oh, those were the days of the Buddha. This was the time for Kalyana Mittas. But then when you read the suttas and read the Vinaya, you hear all these stories about this terrible behaviour of monks and nuns. That naughty Tulananda who was living in a monastery and throwing the buckets from the latrine over the wall and hitting people. You have monks who are having intimate relationship with monkeys. All sorts of terrible things. And you might think, well, maybe it wasn't so good back then. Maybe the people weren't all arahants. Maybe they weren't all good company. I'm just remembering now a recent memory of a monk who attacked in Sydney another monk with a nail gun. So there's always problems. But in the time of the Buddha, there was this famous incident, the incident at Kosambi. And there's several suttas that talk about this. There was a disagreement over a minor rule, which led to a big argument, which led to quarrelling, disputes, fighting, led to a schism in the Sangha, and the lay people being divided onto sides. And the Buddha said, this quarrelling is terrible. It's like verbal daggers. These people hurting each other with these words. And he couldn't understand why these monks weren't able to get along. He said, thieves, murderers, robbers, pillagers, hordes coming to destroy our cities and our country, these people can be united and get along. Why then can't you? What's wrong? And he tried to intervene a few times and he ended up giving up. The monks told him to go away, and so he did. And he went on retreat and just forgot about them for a little while. And so this is the background to a famous sutta, the Chula Sing. Can't remember the full name, but it's a famous sutta about the Kalyana Mittas who were Anuruddha, Nandya, and Kimbala. And the Buddha was visiting them not long after this incident at Kosambi. And so he was asking them, are you getting along? Are you blending like water and milk? Are you looking at each other with eyes of love? So you can imagine him coming across these three well-practicing monks, kind of after dealing with all the other monks at Kosambi, and saying, are you getting along? Are you practicing well? Are you blending? Are you looking at each other? This image of water and milk is very famous. And there's two different liquid forms, and the liquid element, of course, being miscible, able to be mixed, but also cohesive, binding things together, like the flour and water for cooking, or milk and flour for scones, or water and cement for rocks, for concrete. And so it's these two different things that are able to mix together seamlessly and blend. And when he said, are you looking at each other with eyes of love? He said, Piya Chakuma. Are you looking at each other with these eyes full of admiration, kindness? And Anuruddha, who is the spokesperson for the monks, said, yes, we do. And the Buddha was probably very happy to hear this. He said, how? How are you doing this? How are you getting along so well? And Anuruddha said, and I like what he said at first, he said, "It is a gain for me, a great gain, to be living with these venerable monks." And so he starts off with his response talking about how fortunate it is for him to live with such good people. So he really understands and values this friendship that he has with these people. And he's grateful for it. Lucky him. And he says, what I do is I look at these monks with metta, and I make sure that my bodily actions have the intention of metta behind them. And I use loving kindness in my speech and loving kindness in my mind when I think about these people, both in public and in private. And so these are actually 3 of 6 principles of cordiality, cordial behaviour that the Buddha outlined at the time of the Kosambi incident. He rocked up to the monks and gave them a talk about 6 principles of cordial behaviour that was designed to inspire love and respect, cohesion, unity amongst the community. And so Anuruddha probably was showing that he was a good monk by remembering this teaching and relaying it back to the Buddha, saying, I heard you, this is the voice of another, and I paid attention, yoniso manasikare, so the voice of another and wise attention, and practice this. And he's been practicing this, and of course we know that Anuruddha not long after became an arahant. And so you think, maybe there is something to this, listening to the voice of another, paying wise attention. Perhaps there is the potential for these words to have a real impact. And so this is how he practiced, following the Buddha's advice, looking at these people with eyes of love and putting metta into his bodily action. This is something I see here in this community, people doing wonderful kindnesses through bodily actions, like always offering cups of tea or cleaning. Venerable Suki's been cleaning everything, helping each other out, opening doors, doing this, doing that, all these actions of bodily kindness that I see, and also actions of actions of speech that are fueled with metta, the compliments of the chefs, the praise of people's good qualities, and speaking to each other kindly with love. And of course, the opposite of these sorts of things are, using your body to do terrible things, like that monk with the nail gun, or stealing things, or hurting people, killing things, or using speech in a way that is harmful, that hurts, that causes division, and that is harsh and hurts people's feelings. And so this is the opposite of the things that I see here, people being kind, saying nice things. And the last thing he mentioned was using the mind with metta, both in public and private. So when he sees these people having a mind full of metta, and then also when he goes back to his hut in solitude, having a mind of metta. And this is how I feel when I come to this community and see these good people. I have a lot of love in my mind, kindness in my mind towards you. And then when I go back to my hut, it's so nice having friends. I feel good. And I continue to think of you all with this mind of metta. And anyway, so the important thing is Anuruddha has a bit of a trick, it seems. When he was speaking to the Buddha, he said all of these things, and he subsequently said, and what I do is I think to myself, what can I do that is in line with how these monks wish to behave? What can I give up so that I can fall in with them? What is it that I can renounce to allow them to get their way? And so this is a beautiful renunciation that he does, thinking, whatever they want, I will do. And it's very beautiful, and I think you see that also here. What would you like to do, or what would you like to do? I'll do anything. I'm happy to do anything. And you can imagine all these monks, when the Buddha asks them, they all say the same thing. I look at them with eyes of love. I think of them nicely. I use metta with speech and bodily action. They all say the same thing. All of them saying exactly the same thing. And you can imagine just trying to get out of the door. Oh, no, you go first. No, you go first. No, after you. It'd be like some sort of comedy show where they all bump into each other. But much better than attacking each other with nail guns. And so they talk to the Buddha about their daily activities. We all go out for alms round, and someone comes back, the first one comes back, sets up the hall, sets up the stands, set up the bowls, and the last one comes back and they put away the water. If anything needs doing, they say, they do it. And it's like that here at Santi. Someone comes in and sets things up, someone goes, if there's toilet paper that needs to be put on the roll, if there's water that needs to be filled up, if there's a bed that needs to be made, people do it. And so it's very beautiful being here at Santi with good people who care and who use this loving kindness, this mind of loving kindness in all of their actions, speech and mind, maybe, hopefully. And so I feel very fortunate, and it goes to show how beautiful it is when you have an environment that is friendly, that is kind. And you can see why the Buddha said these kinds of things, right speech, right action, and when it comes to the mind, right intention, how these things are conducive not only to developing the Eightfold Noble Path, but the spiritual life in full, and leading to right view, to understanding. And I just want to touch on the other three elements of cordiality, these principles of cordiality that the Buddha talked about. So we've got the body, speech and mind, and all of these things, he said, would lead to harmony and lead to cohesion, lead to respect and love, lead to unity. But the next three are also quite interesting. The first one, or the fourth one, is generosity, chaga, giving. And he said, even sharing the last bit of food from your bowl with your spiritual companions. It's very beautiful, this idea that everything in a place like Santi, everything in a monastery, everything we have, we share. We share the workload, we share the material goods, we share the food. Anyone who comes to Santi gets fed. People have shared it with us and we share it with them. It's very beautiful. We share the requisites. I know that when I come here I can borrow a jumper if I need to. And we share the kutis. We share, everything is shared, and it's a very beautiful mind state. And I'm reminded of the story from the Mahavagga about Vasalka, who was foremost in generosity among the Buddha's lay disciples. So Vasalka, she was famous for asking the Buddha for 8 boons, 8 different requisites that she wanted to give to the Buddha. She asked him permission. She was so nice. Can I give these things to you and the Sangha? And it was things like medicines and bathing cloths, robes. And he said, why do you want to give these things to the Sangha? And she said, because they'll benefit. They'll be warm, they'll have medicine. And he's like, no, why do you want to give it? What do you get out of this act of generosity? And I love her answer because it's so profound. And she said, when I give, I can recollect my generosity. So this is chaga nusati, recollection of generosity. And in dependence upon that recollection, gladness appears in my mind, delight at the thought of people benefiting from my generosity. So gladness appears in her mind. And from that, joy, pamuja, appears, in dependence on the gladness. So you can see there's this escalating scale that's starting to happen. She's being kind and generous. She reflects upon that. Her mind is lifted up, and then it gets lifted up even more with this joy. And she says, when she reflects like this, her body becomes calm and tranquil. So her mind is uplifted with joy, and the body naturally becomes calm and tranquil. This is kaya pasadi. It's tranquility in the body, so you feel good in the mind, you feel good in the body. And the next thing you get, she said, is bliss, sukha, pleasure, ease. All this from an act of generosity. But wait, there's more. She says, once she has this uplifted mind, this calmed body, and this sense of bliss, ease, sukha, she says, then the mind becomes very still. Samadhi. And then, dependent on the samadhi, she says, I can start developing beautiful qualities of mind, like the 5 indriyas, the 5 balas, these spiritual faculties and the spiritual powers, which are faith, energy, mindfulness, samadhi, sati, mindfulness, samadhi, and panya, wisdom. And she said, so you can develop these beautiful states of mind based on, the stillness of samadhi. And she said, even further, you develop the bojjhangas, the 7 factors of enlightenment, awakening. So these are very beautiful mental qualities that she can see you can develop, all based on this simple act of generosity. And it's important in a community like this we kind of think, oh yes, it's good to share, good to be generous, but the profound implications of those acts are for our meditation practice, for our spiritual growth and development. And I love that Visakha was able to respond with such a profound insight for the Buddha, who was naturally delighted. But she had put into practice what she had heard. She'd heard the Buddha talk about generosity. She paid wise attention to his words and was able to see for herself the far-reaching implications in her own mind for her own spiritual growth and her meditation practice. And so this is the 4th principle of cordiality the Buddha talked about, leading to harmony and community. And when you see the far-reaching effects of this act of generosity, when you see that people are developing these very high mind states on the basis of this, you can see why the Buddha recommended it as leading to unity and cohesiveness, because it also develops wisdom. And the 5th thing that the Buddha talked about leading to unity and a cohesive community was virtue, sila. And so as monastics to be, we are training in the Adi Sila Sika, the higher virtue. And in this sutta, the Buddha talks about how this should be unblotched, unblemished, unstained, that our virtue should be as perfect, as pure as it possibly can be. And that this is a cause for unity. This is a cause for cohesion in the community. And you can see why, perhaps if people are all working together, following the same cohort, following whether it's 8, 10, 227 or over 300 precepts, that people are developing their virtue, developing good qualities rubbing off on each other these good qualities. Everyone unified, working towards developing their virtue. And the Buddha said that this had far-reaching implications too. When we develop virtue, we can recollect our virtue. The goodness of our actions is like the shadow of a mountain. That everything in the valley, the plains below, when the sun shines behind this mountain, this long shadow envelops and embraces, this cool shadow of the mountain embraces everything beneath it. And in this way too, when we practice sila nusati, the recollection of our virtue, keeping our precepts, feeling good like this is a blessing for us. This produces this wonderful state, one of my favourite words, the anavajja sukha, the bliss of blamelessness. And this anavajja is a word that we chant in our reflection on food. So we avoid these painful feelings of overeating. We avoid these painful feelings of craving, and we have this blamelessness that is the result of this. In the same way, we avoid, through virtue, through the restraint of the precepts, we avoid bad actions, things that will lead to our harm for ourselves and others. And we avoid sensual pleasures, too much sensuality which would take us away from our practice. So when we develop this anavajja sukha, this bliss of blamelessness, we can be happy and there's no regret in our mind. So we don't have remorse, we haven't done anything against our precepts that causes us to have a sense of self-blame or a sense of regret. We get through the day thinking, I haven't killed anything today. I haven't hurt anyone. I haven't shouted at anyone. I haven't stolen anything. These are all really good qualities that, when they're shared by a community, lift not only the individual but the whole. And wouldn't it be wonderful if the whole world was like this, that everyone was training in virtue, so that there wasn't murder, that there wasn't theft and wasn't sexual misconduct and those things. But when we have this non-regret, there's a sequence of events that can occur in the mind that occur naturally. And there's this wonderful sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya 10s called the Cetana Sutta, which is variously translated as a wish or volitions. And so when one has this sense of non-regret based on good behaviour, virtuous conduct, you don't need to, when you have virtuous conduct, you don't need to wish for this feeling of non-regret, this blamelessness. It arises naturally out of the good behaviour. And when you have this mind of non-regret, this blamelessness, you don't need to wish for joy to arise in the mind. It's natural that for someone who has no regret in their mind, that joy should appear. And for one who has joy in their mind, you don't need to wish, may I have rapture, pity. You don't need to wish for this. It's natural that in one who has joy, rapture will naturally arise in the mind. You don't need to do anything to develop it. And from this rapture, you get the kaya pasadi, this tranquility in the body, naturally comes. And you've probably experienced this in your practice. You're feeling good, you get some joy in the mind, and that joy leads to that rush, that thrill, that pity that comes along. After this, the body relaxes and becomes calm and peaceful. And then samadhi naturally arises in dependence upon this bodily calm and this lifted, this joyful, bright mind. So you have this samadhi, this stillness. And then this, when this is in the mind, you don't have to wish, may I see things as they truly are. This yatabhuta yanadasana. This naturally arises, so insight naturally develops out of the stillness of samadhi. And then for a person who has seen, and I haven't seen this, but the sutta goes on to talk about how having seen, having had this insight, nibbida and dispassion naturally arises in the mind. And this, of course, is what leads to right view and the knowledge of enlightenment. So this, of course, is all dependent upon that restraint of the patimokkha, of the precepts, the restraint of virtue that we have. And so it arises naturally. And this is also arising because the Buddha has talked about these virtues as being a protection, as being conducive to liberation. So it's because of him, again, this voice, this Kalyana Mitta, that we're able to understand how these actions and restraint can lead to such good states of mind, lead to the right view and liberation. And so that's the fifth principle of cordiality that leads to harmony in a community, everyone watching out for their virtue and sharing in the energy that comes from virtuous conduct. And then the sixth thing that the Buddha talks about as being conducive to harmony is developing the wisdom and knowledge of right view, so developing a mind that is leading towards liberation. And he says this, of course, out of all of those things, out of bodily action, good speech, good mental qualities, generosity, sila, and developing right view, out of all of these, developing right view is the chief. It is the pinnacle, he says, the highest point of the house, and the whole house is dependent upon this pinnacle. It's held together by this movement towards right view. And so these beautiful principles, which the Buddha outlined in this sutta, the Kasambiyan Sutta, not only lead to harmony for the community and well-being for us, but our ultimate well-being, in that these things can lead to liberation. Let us hope. something to reflect on. And so this is a small reflection for you on these six cordial principles and the benefit of good friendship. And I hope that we can have a long friendship, this long spiritual friendship, and that we continue to support each other on the spiritual path and help each other towards nirvana, so may you reach the final goal.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.